we can, and we'll post our contact information in the chat. And we're happy to follow up with your questions as best as we can by email. And so, Amy and Tracy, I turn the session over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Amy. We really appreciate being invited here today to speak on this topic, which as you mentioned, is really important and critical. And kudos to those who are joining, who are interested in this, because you've already taken the first step towards, doing well with this process. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get us kicked off. Okay, cool. So if you can just give me a thumbs up if you can see that slide. Wonderful. So as Amy mentioned, we work at Roger Williams University, which is in Bristol, Rhode Island, which is a beautiful location right on the coast. We also have a campus in Providence, downtown, in an urban environment. But we are here to really talk more broadly and generally about financial aid and scholarships and try to give you some really good and helpful information that can help you navigate through a process that we'll admit can be a little overwhelming. It can be a little complicated. So we'll just start off, by acknowledging that this is not easy. Whether it's your first time going through this process or you've been through it before, it can be overwhelming for families. It can be complicated. And so our goal today is to help demystify, some of that, to give you some tools and tips that you can really take with you, and to give you some advice that will help you to go through the process with a greater level of understanding about, what you're seeing and what to expect. And also to let you know that we are here to help. And I'm sure I can speak for probably every financial aid office at every college that that's our job, is to help you and to understand that, along the way, you don't have to be alone in this process. So that said, we're going to cover 4 key areas, and there's a lot of information here. We'll do our best to get through it all. The basics of financial aid, really how to understand affordability and what that means, applying for financial aid and what is involved with that process. And then eventually, when you are admitted to different colleges and universities and you have multiple offers, how do you compare them? And if you do need to appeal for more money, how do you navigate through that process? So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Tracy, to take the first section.
Thank you, Amy. I'm just going to echo Amy's sentiment in that if you have any questions, please feel free to ask at the end, or you can actually email us also directly if you have specific questions about yourself. We are here to help. So if you do have questions, please ask. While it may be something that we are so immersed in, we know it like the back of our hand, we know that parents aren't necessarily, so we're definitely here to help you through the process. So as Amy said, we're going to go through some of the financial aid basics, including total costs and the components of that cost, the types of financial aid, gift aid versus loans, and calculating net cost. And just as a brief intro, we're going to show you a quick 2-minute video that we have created for Roger Williams University.
Let's talk about financial aid. What are the basics of financial aid? Let's take a look at the difference between scholarship, grants, loans, and work study. You might be asking yourself, will I even qualify for financial aid? Generally, there are 2 types of awards, merit-based and need-based. Let's take a look at merit-based awards. How do I qualify for merit-based awards? That's easy. Your achievements, such as your grades, the classes you've taken, and sometimes things like test scores, community service, and your extracurriculars. Merit-based awards are not based on your financial situation. Every college will have their own method for considering merit-based awards. So ask your admission counselor for details. What about athletic scholarships? This one's important to know. They are more rare than many people think. So set your sights realistically by understanding that they are only available for certain sports and only for Division I and Division II schools. Now here's what you need to know about need-based financial aid awards. These are awarded to students who have a financial need. This is based on your economic situation in relationship to the cost.
Agree with that.
Let's talk about the classes you've taken, and sometimes things like every college will have their own method for considering merit-based awards. So ask your admission counselor for details. What about athletic scholarships? This one's important to know. They are more rare than many people think. So set your sights realistically by understanding that they are only available for certain sports and only for Division I and Division II schools. Now here's what you need to know about need-based financial aid awards. These are awarded to students who have a financial need. This is based on your economic situation in relationship to the cost of attending each particular college. Need-based aid is typically in the form of grants, loans, and work study. Along with scholarships, grants are referred to as gift aid. These are funds that do not need to be paid back. There are three types of grants: federal, state, college-specific grants. Loans, on the other hand, do need to be repaid. The two most popular loans are federal subsidized and federal unsubsidized. Subsidized loans don't start accruing interest until you graduate. Unsubsidized loans begin accruing interest as soon as you take it out. Federal loans are typically lower than other options. Work study is when you work part-time to earn funds for your education. Understanding different types of aid will prepare you to compare and assess your college options. We're here to help, so contact us to walk through financial aid options and RWU aid.
Tracy, you're on mute.
Apologize. So we're just going to go over some of the cost components for creating a cost of attendance. And there are basically two types of costs. There's direct costs, which are billed directly by the university, such as tuition fees. And if you live on campus, room and board would also be a direct cost. And then there are indirect costs that are not billed directly by the university, but you are still going to have those associated costs, such as books and supplies, transportation and living expenses. And if you have an apartment off campus, not residing on campus, that apartment costs, so the lease and anything associated with it and your meals are also an indirect cost. So all those together come up with your cost of attendance for each institution. Next, we're going to go into the different types of financial aid, which the video actually did a great job of explaining. So I'm just basically going to just reiterate two things. Grants and scholarships are basically the best type of financial aid because it's free money, it's gift aid that does not have to be repaid. Typically, grants are based on need and scholarships are based on merit for something you've already accomplished in the past. Work study, you do have to earn. Part of the title is that it's work, so you have to work to earn the money. It does not come off the bill. Typically, it's actual funding that the students receive in the form of a paycheck. And then there are also federal student loans, which do have to be paid back. Next, what's important is understanding nut price. When you see the cost of an institution, that can be called the sticker price. And then financial aid, you take your financial aid minus the sticker price, and that is your net price. Net cost is very important because psychologically families can see that getting a high scholarship means that you're actually going to pay less at a school, but it's important that you look at the net cost of each institution. So in the example we're going to use here, scholarship for school A is $22,000 and their tuition is $40,000. So their net cost at that institution is $18,000. College B, they're getting a $30,000 scholarship off of $50,000 in tuition. So the net cost is $20,000. While option B may sound better because it's a higher scholarship on a higher amount of tuition, when you look at that $2,000 difference in the net cost, you actually save over $8,000 over the course of 4 years. So it's very important to look at the net cost for each institution and then also long-term, such as over 4 years. In the next slide, we're just going to talk about how, in addition to the scholarships, subtracting off scholarships, you also want to factor in how much loans impact your net cost. Now, some people may be loan adverse, so they may not want to take out loans. And then others may just want to take the need-based loan, which is a subsidized loan, which is interest-free versus taking the unsubsidized. You have those options and you can actually compare it institution to institution, what you're going to qualify for. I will also let you know that while Roger Williams doesn't do this, some colleges do put as part of a financial aid package a Parent Plus loan. So you also want to factor that in also when you're looking at the loans. So you're comparing the different scholarships that are offered at different schools and also the different loans, and if it includes just student loans or parent loans. Next, we're going to go over to understanding of affordability with Amy.
Thanks, Tracy. So once you have a sense of sort of the basics of what are the components of your financial aid package, and how to look at those and how to assess those, that's all well and good. But the question that many have on their mind is, okay, but what is this going to cost me? I see this sticker price. I know how much the tuition is, the fees, the room and board. But I know that I'm likely, or I hope I'm likely, to qualify for some scholarships and for some financial aid. So how do I figure that out? So the net price calculator is a great tool for you. And every college and university in the United States that's accredited is required to have a net price calculator. So we have another short video that gives you an overview of what a net price calculator is and what it does. I'll play that for you, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it.
What's the real cost of college? Did you know that there can be a big difference between a college's sticker price and the price you would actually pay after qualifying for financial aid? This is where the net price calculator comes in. A college might be more affordable than you think. Every accredited college in the United States is required to have a net price calculator. So what does it do? It allows you to enter your personal, financial, and academic information and get an estimated aid award and your estimated actual cost. How do you find it? Just enter net price calculator into the search box on a college's website, or browse the financial aid section of the website. RWUs can be found at rwu.edu/net-price-calculator. Most net price calculators will ask you for basic academic information, like your GPA and assessment of the rigor of your curriculum. They will also ask you for your family's financial information, including your parents or guardians' income and assets, like investment and savings accounts, your income and assets, and the number of people in your household and how many of them are also in college. It's important to know that the more accurate the information you provide, the more accurate the financial aid award estimate will be. Here are 3 tips. You may want to fill the calculator out along with a parent or guardian who can provide their most accurate financial information. It's incredibly helpful to have a copy of your most recent tax return and bank statement, and provide as much information as you can. This includes answering the optional questions to get the best estimate. Using the net price calculator helps you get a more realistic understanding of costs, so that the sticker price doesn't discourage you from applying. You shouldn't hesitate to contact the admission or financial aid office to talk through your net price calculator results and fully understand the financial aid estimate. We're here to help if you have any questions. Email us at admit@r.
I'll pause that there. So as you can see, those net price calculators are the way that you can try to get that estimate of, okay, this is how much it costs, but how much would I qualify for in scholarships and also in need-based financial aid. It's going to give you a really good idea of what that might look like from school to school. So take advantage of those and use those early on in your college search process. And I'll talk more in a bit about, how that's going to come into play for you as you're making your assessments. But I wanted to talk a little bit about EFC, which is the expected family contribution. And so this expected family contribution is an amount that comes up when you fill out your financial aid application and information, particularly on the FAFSA. And it's based on calculations of a federal formula that is quite honestly pretty simplified, and it's not 100% perfect for everybody. So it's going to do its best to come up with an amount based on all those different pieces that the net price calculator video mentioned, and come up with this is how much based on this formula we think you can afford to pay. So the difference of expected family contribution out of the cost of the institution is your financial need. And so what's important to understand is that every college and university has a way that they package financial aid and the way that they try to do their best to meet the need of the students that they admit. But we have, limited resources, of course, and, just like like many individuals and many other organizations do. So we do our best to stretch that financial aid budget as much as possible to do the best job of providing financial aid for students who qualify for it. But it's important to understand that just because you have an expected family contribution and you can calculate a financial need, that doesn't mean that that's necessarily how much you're going to get from every college in your financial aid package. So it gives you an idea of what that federal calculation would look like, but the net price calculator is really the best place to get an assessment of, what are you really looking at for your own individual cost. So at the end of the day, the net price calculator is what you want to use, and don't focus as much on expected family contribution. So when you're looking, you've got your net price calculator results and you figure out, okay, here's what, this particular college says my financial aid package and my scholarship might look like. And so this would be, my out-of-pocket cost based on that. Every family really has 3 categories of resources. Doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, and that is past, present, and future resources. So we're going to talk a little bit about what those are and how families consider these as they're determining affordability. So past resources are anything that you may have been able to save previously for your education. Any savings accounts that you've put together, 529 plans, which are specifically for educational funds, any investment accounts that you have that you've been able to, save any of this money to apply towards your college education. And so, of course, every family is going to have this or not, and of course, in very different amounts. And then there's your present resources. So based on your total income that you make on a monthly basis, what is left over after you pay, for your expenses and the things that you need to pay for, and how much of those funds can be directed towards your education. One thing that's important to keep in mind is that, you may be able to budget differently or redirect some of the funds that you spend on things if you're prioritizing your college education. So looking at your monthly budget and figuring out what can go towards college instead of something else, is a decision that families will have to make together. And then there's also, as Tracy mentioned, one of the components of financial aid are the work study funds. And so whether you qualify for work study as part of your financial aid package or you get a paid job on campus wherever you attend, those are funds that you'll have available to you. Though we find oftentimes that students end up using those funds for expenses, supplies, books, and things like that, rather than directing them towards the bill. But that's a decision that every student will make about how they want to apply those. And then there's future funds, and this is where you're borrowing, money. And so there's the student loans that you may qualify for as part of your financial aid, the federal loans that we mentioned, the Parent Plus loan that Tracy mentioned, which is an additional supplemental amount of money that can be taken out in the parent's name. If you have the ability and the capacity, oftentimes families who have equity in their home will be able to take out a home equity line or to refinance and pull equity out of their home value to pay for college. And everybody is going to have their own ability and their own comfort level, of course, with each of these different things, and ability to borrow money in these different ways. But that's another kind of main source that many families take advantage of. So as I mentioned before, you do the net price calculator, you get a sense of what the output is and what you might qualify for at different schools. And that's going to sort of inform, we advise you to let that inform your strategy as you're researching colleges. So many of us are familiar with this approach when you're thinking about it in terms of admission. You kind of have your safety schools, which are schools that you're pretty sure you're going to be able to get into these schools. They're a clear choice for you. There's your match schools that you think you're a pretty good fit, and you kind of fall into the mix academically and you feel pretty good about. And then your reach schools where you're not sure if you'll get admitted. It's worth a shot, see what happens. We also recommend that you employ a similar strategy when you look at it from a financial perspective. So based on the net price calculator and based on the information that you know about how much the school costs and what types of funds might be available to you, you're going to have schools that may be a secure fit for you, where financially, you feel like you can handle it without a lot of, sacrifice. The match school in this scenario is one that, feels affordable. Maybe it involves taking out some student loans, taking advantage of a payment plan, making some different lifestyle choices, like redirecting funds from vacations to college, things that you're willing to do and you feel like you can make it work. And then there's your reach schools where it really feels like, the financially it's going to be a stretch for you. It might involve taking out more loans than you might feel like you want to, or some other more major sacrifice to your day-to-day to make it work. So when you come up with your list and you're categorizing your colleges, they're going to fall in different places based on the admission fit and the financial fit, and they're not necessarily going to align. So it's just important to understand, when you're looking at these schools, where do they fall? Because that's going to help you go into the process with more realistic expectations and really understanding kind of, what to expect. And it can prevent against, being really kind of caught off guard, when you get the financial aid package or you don't get admitted where you applied. So you're setting yourself up in a way, to kind of anticipate what might happen for you. So giving an example of what this might look like, we'll give an example of a family of four, and this is all made up information, but trying to get at some sort of like a middle range. So this family of four has a total family income of $100,000 per year. Based on that, their income taxes are about $13,600. Let's say they put about 15% of their income annually into their 401k, so subtract that out, and they pay for health insurance. They're left with about $66,000 in net income out of all of those things. So what would that look like? They have a mortgage or they have a rent payment, they have car payments and insurance and their utility bills and all the kind of basic things that we need these days. So if we kind of figure some kind of average amounts for those, then they're now left with just under $25,000 for other expenses. So what are those? Well, clothes and birthday parties that you need to throw for your kids and going out to a restaurant every once in a while. Maybe you have children in private school. Maybe you do some donations. All of the things that are part of our everyday life, not necessarily luxuries, but the things that are typical. So based on that information, think about in your head, what would their expected family contribution be? I'll give you a minute to think about it, and then I'll show you, and you can see if you were right or not. We won't actually ask you. So their expected family contribution based on that kind of simplified data is about $16,000 a year. And so you saw that, they were left with just under $25,000 after they're meeting their kind of basic needs for all of the other things. And so then you subtract the 16,000 out of that, and it paints a picture of what this family is really looking like. So all of that said, kind of turning back to what I said originally, just because that's their expected family contribution, it doesn't mean that their financial aid package is going to necessarily be the same from college to college. So that's where you have to use a net price calculator to get an idea of what that would look like. All right, I'm gonna turn it back over to Tracy, and we're gonna talk about applying for financial aid.
So how a school gets that expected family contribution is that you have to go through the process of applying for financial aid. And there's primarily two different ways that you can apply for financial aid. Primarily, FAFSA is for all federal financial aid, and then the profile is for typically for private institutions. When they're calculated their own institutional financial aid, they use the CSS Profile form. In addition, some schools do require institutional applications. So if they don't require a CSS profile, in some cases, private institutions have their own institutional application because they use that information to come up with their own institutional expected family contribution. So we're just going to quickly go through some of the fields that are basically what is used to calculate your expected family contribution, which in 23-24, the FAFSA is going through a simplification process, and it's actually going to be known as the Student Aid Index instead of the expected family contribution. So the FAFSA fields that are considered right now are parents' income, parents' assets, and then it's the student's income and the student's assets. That information taken in consideration in addition to how many people are in your household and how many family members are going to college, they calculate your expected family contribution. Another thing that is going to be changing with the FAFSA simplification process that should be taking place in 23-24 is that they are right now going to remove the number in college. So families who have multiple siblings in school at the same time, where in the past the family contribution would have been cut in half or cut in third, depending on how many you have in college, right now they have decided to exclude that as part of the formula come 23-24 for financial aid purposes. The FAFSA, because so much of the information is based on income and assets, that income information you can download directly from the IRS using the data retrieval tool. So once you have the information for the expected family contribution, basically the difference that it takes between the parents' information and the student information is that they expect the student to contribute to this also, and their rates or percentages of their information is actually higher than the parents, where a parent's income would be somewhere between 0 to 47% as part of what goes towards the contribution, and their assets are 0 to 5.5% of their assets. A student is expected to contribute almost 50% of their income above $6,000 basically, plus 20% of their assets. So if a family has a 529 plan and it's in the student's name, it would actually impact the family contribution higher than if it was in the parent's name, just as an example. So that's just how they calculate the family contribution as it relates to a parent versus a student. Next, I'm just going to go over some of the differences between the CSS profile and the FAFSA form. As I mentioned, the FAFSA is going to go through a simplification process. It's actually pretty straightforward nowadays to complete, where you can actually download everything directly from the IRS. So it actually is not too much effort, but they are going to even reduce the number of questions down even furthermore. Unlike the CSS profile form, which is much more complicated, the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA, is free in its title, where the CSS profile form, there is a cost associated with it, and you actually pay a fee just to register for the CSS profile form, and then you do have to pay a fee for all the colleges that actually require the CSS profile. So that is important to remember. They also ask a lot more information on the CSS profile, such as information from the non-custodial parents, net worth of a family business, home equity. These are all things that are traditionally not on a FAFSA. Non-qualified annuities, medical expenses. They ask for trust information. They even ask how many cars the family has and the value of those cars, the years you've purchased them. So there's a lot of additional information that they require. Now, the reason they ask for all this information is because there's actually two expected family contributions. One that is based on the federal government, and that's your federal EFC. And then there's also an institutional EFC, which each college does to create their own need for institutional funding and how they award their institutional funding. The next thing we're going to discuss is when you should be applying for financial aid at different schools. So when you selected the college that you're, do you want to do it when you selected the college that you want to enroll to? Do you want to wait until you're admitted to apply for financial aid? Or do you want to apply at the time you're actually submitting your application? So the answer is you actually want to apply as soon as you're admitting your application for admission, because the FAFSA actually is live October 1 for fall admission. So as soon as you know where you're going to apply, it's worth getting that FAFSA submitted, and you can actually list up to 10 different colleges on that FAFSA form.
Okay, so in the last section, we're gonna kind of move forward, and let's imagine we're at the point where you've been admitted to multiple colleges and you've got multiple award letters, and you're wanting to compare them and to make the right choice. And perhaps maybe you feel like you need to ask for additional aid. So let's talk a little bit about that. When you're comparing financial aid awards from college to college, it would be great if all colleges presented their financial aid award in the same template in the same way. Unfortunately, as we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, they do not. So it adds, this sort of level of complexity to the process because you're looking at different aid awards that are presented in different ways. So one recommendation that we have is there's actually this financial aid shopping sheet, which you can see kind of just a screenshot of it on the screen. Which is something that the federal government actually put together a number of years ago. It was never required that colleges use it, but it was really recommended. But it's just a great template for you to use to take what you're receiving from each college in the award package and to categorize it and plug it in a way that lets you compare apples to apples. So it takes kind of what we said earlier on, you've got your gift aid, your grants and scholarships, which as Tracy told you, that's the good stuff, the stuff that you don't have to pay back. And you categorize that in a particular place to get at your net cost. And then you take a look at, well, what opportunities do I have for work study and what opportunities do I have for loans to meet that net cost? And then what am I left with after that? Because in some financial aid award letters, unfortunately, they'll calculate your loans right into your net cost and make it look like your net cost is really low, but it's actually factoring in loans that you may or may not want to take. And be on the lookout, as was mentioned earlier, for that Parent Plus loan, because that is something that not everybody necessarily wants to take. So make sure that's not getting factored into your net cost on your financial aid award letter. So this is just a way for you to more easily compare apples to apples. Okay, so now you're comparing your net cost from school to school. What are some things that you need to consider in addition to that? So let's say you got an academic scholarship. Awesome, that's great that you qualified for that. That means that you're a good student and we think you're capable of doing well in college. But within that scholarship, you need to take a look and see if there's a minimum GPA requirement in order to maintain that scholarship. And is that GPA requirement aggressive, something that might be difficult for you, or does it feel more comfortable? That gives you a sense of, how sure of a thing is it that I'll continue to receive this scholarship from year to year. Also, are there a minimum number of credits that you need to take each semester in order to qualify for that scholarship? Typically, you have to be a full-time student, but it might vary from school to school. And if study abroad is something that you definitely want to do you still have your scholarship during that study abroad period or not? So these are things that may not necessarily be deal breakers for you, but just they're things to understand as you're making those comparisons. Another question is your financial aid guaranteed for years 2 through 4? So if you've submitted the FAFSA or forms for need-based financial aid, you're actually going to do that every year that you're enrolled in college because your financial aid situation might change from year to year, and you'll continue to reapply so that you can qualify for any federal funds or any other kind of need-based financial aid from year to year. What's kind of more rare to find, and actually I will say Roger Williams is one place that does this, is that we guarantee that whatever institutional aid we've given you, so our Roger Williams funds, that you will get it throughout all 4 of your undergraduate years. But not every college is going to be able to say that. So have an understanding of whether that's guaranteed or not, and get a sense of, do you think your financial aid situation is going to be changing in the future in any way? For example, maybe you have, there's a couple children in college at once, but one of them is going to graduate, and be aware of that change and what that's going to mean for your future financial aid. And then it's also really important to understand that you should expect tuition to increase at least, usually modestly from year to year. Just like, we all individually have increased costs on an annual basis, whether it's gas or food or whatever, things increase. Our electric bill, colleges and universities have those same cost increases as well, which, they need to absorb and they need to deal with. And so it's very typical for a college to increase their tuition somewhere around 3 to 3.5% on average every year. And so be thinking about that. And are there additional scholarship funds or opportunities to qualify for aid in those subsequent years that can help absorb some of that increase? So we've been talking a lot about cost and a lot about calculations, but there's a really important piece of this that I really want to drive home to you, which is that it's usually not about, okay, let's just make our decision based on cost, because colleges are different and they're going to offer you different things. And so I really, really urge you to think about this more in terms of value than cost. You are investing in your college education. This is a big, important investment, and it's going to pay off for you in the future. You have much more of an opportunity for earnings and for professional success with a college degree. And so you want to make sure that you're making the right choice that's the right fit for you, that's going to be able to provide you with the environment and the types of experiences that are going to set you up best for success. That may not always be the lowest cost place. You might be willing to invest a little bit more to get the kind of experience or the kind of program that you know is really important to you. So think about value. You want to make a decision that's a good one financially, but think about, which is the place that's going to offer me the most value. And that is always a personal decision and something that will be different from student to student, family to family. Okay, so say you get into, your dream school and you're super excited and you're struggling a little bit to see how to make this work financially. What do? There is an opportunity to appeal for more financial aid. And a lot of times this happens when there's a change in your financial situation. So one thing to know is that when you fill out your FAFSA, your financial aid documents in your applications, you're actually using your financial information from 2 years ago. So if you're applying, you're using tax returns that you submitted for 2019 this year. So some things may have changed since then, and your financial situation might be different. So that's where you're going to want to appeal to the financial aid office and say, in 2019 I had this job that paid more, and then I got laid off, and now I have this job that pays less. Or I got a bonus that year, and so my income looks higher, but that was just a one-time thing, and I don't have it now. Things like that, that may have changed. There may also be an opportunity to appeal if when you applied for admission, we didn't have your senior grades and you did really, really well your senior year and your GPA increased a lot. Some schools might recalculate your scholarship based on that updated GPA. And then there's just, if a family is in a situation where they really want to enroll at a school, but they're not seeing how it can work financially, it can't hurt to ask and see what opportunities there might be for you. So start with a discussion about, are there options for me? If you're really interested, reach out. It can't hurt to ask. And, to really kind of just have that conversation. To be honest with you, we do also see oftentimes that families and students will appeal financial aid when they're comparing offers from college to college and they may have received a higher scholarship at a different school. My advice to you is that if you see that, reach out and understand first how those scholarships are calculated before you just ask a college to match another award or you assume that they might do that. Because every college is going to take into consideration different factors when they put together their academic scholarships. And every college's admitted student pool also looks different, whether it's a more selective place or a less selective place. So it can vary quite a bit depending on what they look at and how they look at it and the overall makeup of that admitted student pool. So my advice to you is seek to understand first and then decide, if there's a pathway to appeal, based on kind of what you're seeing as far as your different offers. So as I mentioned, first seek to understand, get the information, ask the questions, make sure you fully understand the financial aid package. And then if you feel like you want to move forward with a financial aid appeal or a scholarship appeal, be prepared to provide information to support that. So, your updated transcript that shows that increased GPA, if there's any involvements or accomplishments that were recent that weren't included in your application, share that information. And financial documentation to support, the changes in the financial situation that you may have had. So do you have more recent W-2s? Do you have more recent pay stubs? Do you have, medical expenses that you can provide documentation to show? And the financial aid office will help you understand what to submit and what they're looking for. So ask them first, and then you can follow through with that information. And the other piece of advice that I'll provide to you is that, well, we fully appreciate that in many circumstances that the parents or guardians are really kind of taking on a lot of the burden for paying, for this and helping their student invest in college. It is the student, the applicant who applied and will be attending. So we do appreciate it if the applicant themselves is the one to initiate the appeal and to be part of that process versus it just being the parent or guardian who's sort of driving the car with this whole thing. It is really nice to see the student, be part of it and to take the initiative. So I offer that to you. When you do appeal your financial aid, I just wanted to go through quickly, what does the appeals committee look like? There is a lot of intentionality and thoughtfulness to this process because, as I mentioned at the outset, colleges and universities do have limited financial resources, and we're trying to maximize them to the best that we can to help as many students and families that we can be able to have access to our education. So we're working within the limitation from the outset. So when you appeal, we're going to look at, if you've had changes to your financial situation, should we be looking at 2 years ago information, or should we be looking at last year's income? We're going to take a look at your expenses and your personal circumstances in relationship, to your expected family contribution, and be able to really get an understanding of context. We're going to take a look at all of the aid opportunities that might be available to you and make sure that we're maximizing all of those opportunities. We're also going to help families compare net costs if they're not already doing that. So we'll walk through with you the calculation of, okay, you said that you got this larger award from this other school, but they cost significantly more than we do. So let's take a look at what that actual net cost is. We oftentimes walk through that with families to help them make sure that they're understanding all of it. We also really take into consideration equity. So if we have a lot of applications from a particular high school, we want to make sure that the academic scholarships make sense within that school group, but also within our overall admitted student pool, we want to make sure that those academic scholarships make sense in the larger context of students we've admitted. And as I mentioned, we're working within our resources and our budget and the different goals that we have in order to stay viable financially as an institution. At the end of the day, we do our work with a lot of empathy, and it's a balance. We want to help families as much as possible, but we have to also work within what our institution has to offer, and want to drive home again, take into consideration value and never hesitate to reach out if you have questions. We never want you to feel like you don't have the information or you don't understand it. All right, so we're going to stop there. There's a lot of information for you, but we're happy to answer any questions that you have on any of that.
Well, I would just like to start by saying thank you to you both, and I can't wait until things in this country open up and you can take this on the road, because I think this information is so important and laid out so very well, and obviously we can see there's so much of it, and it's changing. So this is absolutely vital, and I love your concept of financial fit and financial reach and financial safety. I think that really does play into a lot of people's requirements and concerns. And I'm just going to post a starting question because I didn't see anything else up there. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about students who take a gap year after they've been accepted. They've applied to a school, they've been accepted to a school, they decide they're going to take a gap year. This year was certainly a year that was kind of crazy with gap years. So how would that affect financial aid, either need-based or scholarship? When they come back to school a year later, would that financial aid offer follow them? Would they have to start all over again? Can you speak a little bit to how that works in your school and if you know how it works in other schools?
Sure. So I can talk a little bit from the scholarship perspective, and then I'll let Tracy kind of weigh in on the need-based aid. So typically, the school would, honor the scholarship. I know for Roger Williams, if a student did a gap year and they had any kind of like academic work they were doing during that time, they could submit that to us for us to potentially take into consideration to increase the scholarship if we could, but we would essentially guarantee, that they would have their scholarship for whenever they're ready to enroll. With their need-based financial aid, you're now another year further in. So Tracy, do you want to speak to that part of it?
Correct. So what happens is you would need to do a new FAFSA for that given year. So depending on what your need is for that year. But as Amy said, one of the things we do is we guarantee the aid. So if they took a gap year, we would honor that financial aid. Only the federal aid would change based on a new FAFSA. So that would be the first thing we would ask somebody to do, is just update their FAFSA. And then if there was a significant change, we could also go through the appeal process that Amy discussed.
And can you also explain a little bit about the gap year process? If a student wants to take a gap year, is that an automatic, yes, you can take a gap year, or do they have to be approved by the school?
Yeah, so it's going to be a little different from college to college, but typically you do need to get approval for that. And each college is going to have their own policy around what you can or cannot do during a gap year. We really relaxed our policy last year just because of everything that was going on. We used to limit the amount of college courses that students could take during a gap year, because essentially if you were going to, take a full complement of college courses, then we would ask you to reapply as a transfer student after that. But we really kind of relaxed that to best accommodate students. But it's typical to see that a gap year might have a limitation, and they don't really want you to be enrolling anywhere else during that time off, because then you become a transfer student rather than a student who's deferred their enrollment. So it's best to reach out to the college, understand what's involved, understand what you're committed to. If you're going to defer your enrollment, typically a college will ask you to still place the enrollment deposit down by the deadline to secure your spot, and then you'll have to indicate which semester you're planning to enroll. And what's typical is that a college will allow you to defer your enrollment for either one semester or one full year.
Okay, thank you. I just have to say that we know that colleges are businesses. They have to make money in order to survive. But I really love that your school and your as individuals, I love a humanistic approach to obviously working with families and students and us. And I personally really appreciate that. So just to get a little bit more gruff, could you just go through the subsidized versus unsubsidized loans and a little more clarity on that?
So the subsidized loan is interest-free while the students are in school. So as long as they're in school at least half time, it is interest-free. It's subsidized because they showed need on their FAFSA. So it is a need-based process through financial aid to get a subsidized loan. And the unsubsidized loan, everybody who files a FAFSA gets at a minimum $2,000 in unsubsidized loan. And if they get up to the cap of $5,500, it's because they had absolutely no need for financial aid.
Okay. We did have a question come in that says, please explain the change in FAFSA for 23-24. This family will have 3 in college at the same time.
Yeah, Tracy and I were just talking about this. It's right now what's proposed is an attempt to simplify so there aren't as many questions asked, but they also are expanding opportunities for people to qualify for Pell Grants, which is a good piece of it. But there definitely is the piece of no longer taking into consideration the number in college at once, which is, to be quite honest with you, something that is not going to be for a family like that. That's not necessarily going to be in your favor. So we'll see what happens between now and then. I don't know if there's an opportunity that might end up changing or not. But as of right now, it would basically be the expected family contribution would be what it is for each child in college at once. I don't know if Tracy, you want to add to that?
No, it is funny because I was in a conference call with some other financial aid directors from the area, and we were talking to someone in DC, and they said that is the one thing that they're actually surprised about, because it does actually help families who have multiple in college. So they think that actually may be revisited. It's not a guarantee because it is a couple of years out, but that is the one simplification change that is really making people scratch their heads, because it's a benefit. And if you want more people to go to college, you should allow them to keep that benefit of allowing for the multiple siblings to be part of the process in cutting down your family contribution, or your student aid index, as what it's going to be called in a couple of years.
Yeah, can you just repeat the fact that the EFC is not going to be called the EFC, and is there a change in what it is, or is that just a change of language?
Right now, it's a change in the language because there is such, calling it an expected family contribution confuses families, because they expect that's their family contribution. So in some cases, when a family has a 0 expected family contribution and they have a full Pell Grant, they expect the college to give the rest. And unfortunately, the expected family contribution as it stands now is the minimum that the family would be expected to contribute. What they actually have to contribute is what the cost is minus a financial aid package. So I think because of that misnomer is why they're switching it to student aid index. Right now, everything is going to be calculated similarly in that it's going to look at parents' income and assets. But another large change is that for divorced families, right now it's the custodial parent, where they're actually talking about it'll be the parent who makes the most money in a divorce situation that'll have to complete the FAFSA. So that's a significant change for some people also.
Yeah, that's a huge change. I don't see another question from our attendees, but I did have another question. Forbes magazine had run an article, basically gave a scorecard to the financial stability of a lot of schools in this country, and boy, most of them did not fare very well. Do you think that that's got any bearing really on the financial viability and the future sustainability of schools? Because I saw a lot of schools on that list that I would have no trouble suggesting for students to go to, but I've had parents say, oh, well, Forbes gave this school a C+, and is this school going to be around next year? And we do have schools that have gone under, especially in the past couple of years. So what should we take away from that kind of report card, if you will, on the financial stability of schools?
Yeah, that's a great question. Anytime anybody tries to rank anything, there's always some inherent flaws in that. So I think that I would really dig deeper into what exactly are they looking at to give that score, and see what's involved with that. But that's where I think it's important to do that due diligence and take a look at each college and university, and what their history of enrollment has been, and take a look at where they're investing and how they're investing in improvements and facilities and things like that, and to make an assessment. It is true, unfortunately, we've seen a good amount of colleges and universities that have closed in recent years. So I think it's really important that families are aware of that and are have a critical eye towards that. Tracy, I don't know if you would add anything else in there.
I would definitely agree, and just that it's another factor is one of the things we do is we very carefully determine how much we can spend in financial aid, because whatever we spend in financial aid is taken away from the student experience, if you will. Sometimes we see financial aid packages from other schools and we're like, how could they possibly do a 97% discount? It's just not financially feasible for that school to be giving away this kind of money. So that's why it kind of, you want to look at those things also. And one of the things that Amy said is that, do schools guarantee aid? So that's definitely a question that students should be asking, especially when they get very large scholarships. Is that going to be guaranteed for 4 years? Because that's definitely a factor. And I know, you know, financial viability is something that's very important, but sometimes we wonder when they give away such huge scholarships, how they're making money to support teaching and everything else for the students.
Right.
Yeah. And
Well, our time is, I'm sorry, Amy.
I just wanted to say one more thing. For nonprofit institutions, which many colleges and universities, most of them are, financial information is publicly available. So if anybody is savvy and knows how to read those statements, you can find that out there, and it is accessible to you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you everyone for attending, and thank you to Amy and Tracy for your amazingly informative and humanistic presentation. And I hope everyone else enjoys the fair today and gets a lot out of it. And again, this video will be available if you have registered, which obviously you have, you're on here. It will be available, and yeah, you're probably going to want to go through it with a fine-tooth comb and take those notes. Everyone have a wonderful day and enjoy the rest of the fair, and thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.